Welcome to Making Melodies with uMelo Episode 2, where we will go through the process of creating an original instrumental melody in a DAW piano roll and show how we went from an empty canvas to this. First step. Get inspired. Easy. Open uMelo. One press. Done. Before we start shaping our melody, let's take a closer look at the inspiration crafted by uMelo. The inspiration comes in the form of an 8-measure melodic template that will be used as a starting guide to give our melody its initial shape. The motion component suggests that the melody should be descending, which means the last note of the melody will end on a lower pitched note than the start note. The QLE component, quantity, length, and emergence, tells us about the unique phrases contained in this melody. The quantity of unique phrases, how long they should last and how often they should play. In this case, there are 2 unique phrases, labeled P1 and P2. With each lasting 2 measures in length. P1 plays 3 times in the melody, during measures 1 to 2, 3 to 4, and 5 to 6. P2 plays once, during measures 7 to 8. The phrase component shows us the general melodic contour that each phrase can be expressed as. For this melody, the contour of the P1 phrase can be expressed as a combination of one note and arch contours. P2 can be expressed as a combination of inverted arch and arch contours. Here's an approximate overlay of the melodic template shape, which we can follow as tightly or as loosely as we want to create our melody's initial shape. Next, onto the essential step of breathing some soul into this melody by crafting up its rhythm pattern. The type of rhythm to impart will greatly depend on the character or vibe you want the melody to have. We will go for an uptempo active vibe in this melody. Each phrase contour will have its own rhythm pattern. A rhythm pattern is an irregular succession of notes. A motif. A musical idea that has a small collection of notes, typically between 2 and 10. A motif with lots of notes can even be split into smaller groups. Rhythm patterns don't need to be complex, but if you want the melody to be interesting and noticed, you need to make them contrast from the underlying steady metrical beat of the music. You can tap them out physically or click them into the piano roll. We will click ours into the piano roll to craft up our initial rhythm patterns for this melody. Looking at the melodic template shape overlay, there looks to be a call and response pattern that could happen between P1 and P2. P1 calls repeatedly, 3 times, building up a feeling of tension, before P2 finally responds, creating a feeling of tension being released. Okay. So now let's get started on getting our initial rhythm pattern down. Nice. Time to shape. Pick a key. B minor. Okay. Now that we have our uMelo-inspired melody shaped, we will work on creating the finished melody by imparting our individual artistic expression combined with some general techniques to guide us along the way. There are countless different versions that this melody could have finished as, and even then could still be revised further if needed depending on harmonic content and other elements that play along with this melody in a piece of music, or even depending on the type of role you want the melody to have. This is the version we have settled on. So now let's take a look at some of the techniques used to create this melody. We'll start by bringing it back to a pure rhythm pattern. The rhythm pattern for P1 feels like it is made up of two distinct rhythmic motifs, one for each of the contours that combine to make up its phrase. P2 also feels like it is made up of two distinct rhythmic motifs, with one for each of the contours in its phrase. P2's rhythm pattern contains almost all the same notes that make up P1, with a few more additional notes. The similarity in rhythm patterns of both phrases creates unity in the melody, while the phrases have different melodic contours, which adds a pleasant balance of variety to the unity. The rhythmic cadence of P1 isn't easily perceived, as P1 starts and ends with repeated 16th notes, and also because P2 starts with repeated 16th notes. Makes P1 seem to propel itself into the start of the succeeding phrases, helping to drive the melody forward. Also adding to the drive is that the rhythmic cadence of P2 ends on a metrically weak beat, which is after the and of the fourth beat in the 8th measure, giving it an unresolved feel to help propel the melody into being repeated again. The longest break between notes in the melody happens mid-P1, making it feel like that it's split into two smaller phrases that also allows the listener some melodic rest in this busy tune. It has a total of 54 notes, making it quite an active melody, with a majority of those being offbeat notes, making the melody interesting as it contrasts from the underlying steady beat. Now let's take a look at the melody in its finished form with the contour tones in place. P1 and P2 are a sequence that provide a sense of melodic coherence as both phrases incorporate the same rhythm notes but are played with different contours. There is good use of the root and the third early on in the melody to help establish tonality. And supporting this also is that every phrase starts on the root note before venturing out on its melodic journey. It has variety in motion, containing a good mix of steps, 1 to 2 semitones, leaps, 3 or more semitones, and repeats, where the next tone is the same as the previous. The pitch gap made by the leap in P1 is filled in with stepwise motion afterwards to help with melodic cohesion. Although in our melody it proceeds immediately after the leap, the stepwise fill could also happen gradually during later parts of the melody. We've ended up using the B grand minor scale, which contains all of the notes of all the 3 minor scale types: the natural, melodic and harmonic minors, combining to create the 10-note grand minor scale. A chromatic note has also made its way into our melody. The note of C does not fit into this B grand minor scale, but does not feel out of place in this melody. Perhaps because that it is being used as a brief passing tone during a succession of 16th notes. This chromatic passing tone also helps to add a bit of charming variety. The melodic climax, the highest note in the melody, is positioned well, allowing it to elicit an emotional response with the following attributes. It lands on a leap note, a leap of a minor third interval, and also as the climax note being the minor third itself, helps to emphasize the qualities of a minor scale. It is the first note to be played after the longest rest period in the phrases of the melody. The lowest note in the melody, in P2, also stands out to serve as part of another climax. P1 plays 3 times before P2. They share the same rhythm notes. In P1 there is a distinct period of rest before a leap upwards of a minor third. After these same rhythm notes played in P2, there is instead step motion down played immediately after, followed by the biggest leap in the melody, a major third, to the second of the scale. This helps to elicit an emotional response by disrupting the natural expectations of the listener. The calls have motion rising in pitch, giving a feel of inquisition, with cadence that feels like it's on the second of the scale. The response has a motion lowering in pitch, giving a feel of the reply, with cadence on the 8th of this 10-note grand minor scale. Both the 2nd and 8th of this scale have a dissonant frequency ratio of 9:8, with respect to the root note, creating an unresolved feel for the cadence of each phrase, which helps propel the melody forward as it seeks resolution. The last note of the melody is at a lower pitch than the first note of the melody as suggested by our uMelo melodic template, which allows for an overall descending feel of the melody. Finally, we've replaced the piano sound we've been using to create this melody with a raspy pluck type sound which has an instant attack with short decay, sustain and release. This has been a valuable exercise in creating a melody according to the melodic template crafted by uMelo. The template saved us a bunch of time and effort, allowing us to very quickly go from an empty canvas to having a full melody idea. And although we may not find use for the final melodies created in this process, it did provide great experience and practice at crafting our own melodies, and it also encouraged us to try new creative possibilities which we may not have attempted otherwise. We really hope you've been able to take something away from this episode that you can add to or expand upon in your own creative process. You can find more details about this episode listed in the video description. We'd love to see your discussion and questions in the comments section, and we'll catch you in the next one.